Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyette, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by Lazy Boy Home Furnishings. You know Lazy Boy is a national brand, of course, but its Amarillo store is independently owned and operated by the Hawkins family, and they live here in this area. And here's the thing, they offer a lot more than just recliners. Amarillo's locally owned Lazy Boy Home Furnishings has a ton of products in stock. They're ready for you to take home or deliver today. So go visit the Lazy Boy of Amarillo showroom at 3636 Sonsie. And as part of this podcast partnership with Brick & Elm Magazine, I want to give a podcast shout out to Amarillo College and Texas Tech Physicians Pediatrics. The July-August issue of Brick & Elm is available now in print at United Supermarkets, at Burrowing Owl, Barnes & Noble, and lots of other locations across town, or you can find it online at brickandelm.com. Today's guest is Angie Duncan. Angie is known locally as Amarillo's Narcan Lady. She's the head of an organization called Texas Panhandle Overdose Awareness, and you may have encountered her at local events where she hosts a table where she gives out Narcan. This drug is also known by the generic name naloxone, and it's a medication that is used to rapidly reverse the effects of opioid overdose, especially related to drugs like heroin, fentanyl, and painkillers like oxycodone. It's a life-saving drug if you have it available. In fact, Angie's organization has given out drugs that literally saved people's lives in recent months. And because of a very personal story, Angie is dedicated to making sure local people have this product available. She's an Amarillo native, so we talk about her personal story. We talk about how a fentanyl overdose impacted her family. We discuss the process of grief and why conversations about what she does, handing out Narcan, can be uncomfortable in this area. Here's Angie Duncan. Angie Duncan, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you.
I'm honored to have you. I'm interested to hear more about your story. And I want to start with you the same way I start with all my guests, and that's just to ask why you're here in Amarillo. So what brought you to this area?
I moved here when I was 14 with my dad's job. He came here to work for utility engineering and later Pantex. And I've just been here ever since, for the most part.
Where did you live before that?
From Birmingham, Alabama.
All right, so that's...
the land of the trees.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's still sort of the South. There are discussions about whether Texas is the South, but it's definitely different.
Texas will say that it's definitely South, but you ask my mama, and this is not the South.
Yeah, it's Midwest or something.
It's definitely a different atmosphere.
14 is a hard time to move.
Yes,
what do you remember about that period?
I remember I thought I was really cool. It was very hard to move during that time because you're in the middle of trying to make friends and trying to find your own identity and who you are really. And I made it. I caused a lot of stink in my home, but I settled down and it was okay.
I have some family who live in Alabama, and they have a pretty distinct accent. Did you have a heavy accent when you moved here?
I was made fun of
Were
here.
you?
I don't know that it was made fun of. I was more questioned a lot. Say Sprite, and back then it was. I listened to recordings or go home. I just was recently home for a family reunion, and now I say Sprite. Well, they're saying Sprite and Light, and I don't talk that way anymore. And I'm kind of sad about it, actually.
Did that happen naturally?
It
it wasn't something where you said, okay, I'm going to get rid of this accent so I fit in.
I was always proud of it. So I didn't even really realize that I've lost it as much as I had until I went back.
Okay.
Here recently, last month, actually. And my kids even commented. I have little kids at home, and they commented that, why do they talk like that? They're awesome.
Do you fall back into it, like when you spend time there?
That's funny. I don't think I do, but my sisters were watching a video of me talking to one of my cousins because he was hula hooping, and she was like, why do you sound like that?
Tell me where you went to school when you moved here and kind of got settled in Amarillo.
I went to Austin Middle School, and then I went to New Covenant Ministries.
Okay. What was New Covenant Ministries?
It's a private school. Lynn Pratt ran it. She's gone now, but she ran it, and she wrote her own curriculum.
Okay.
So it was kind of homeschool, away from home.
But in a religious setting,
It was a religious setting.
All right. And then once you got to the end of that educational experience, tell me Tell me what you did. Did you have a plan? Did you know what you wanted to do? Did you have a career goal or anything like that?
I was always really interested in mental health. I ended up getting married at an early age instead, and bad decisions were made.
Okay.
But I did end up going to college eventually, and I went for substance abuse counseling. I had no idea what I was doing, and I had no idea what that would hold for me later. At the time, it was just something that my heart was bleeding out to, and then it became, real life.
Okay, so it was not a personal connection to that
No.
at that point, just something that you were interested in.
Yes.
Did you finish a degree or anything like that?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I had a baby. I had my oldest son, Drew, and went from there.
Okay. That's a fairly common story.
It is.
We all know a lot of people like that.
I broke my mama's heart.
Tell me about your life and your family then.
Then?
Yeah.
Like I said, I made bad decisions. I married into an abusive marriage. We were both very young, and had Drew, and I really focused on being a mom, and
Still lived in Amarillo though.
I did.
You were
I
here.
still lived in Amarillo. I've lived in Amarillo. I went back when I was 17 for a little while to Alabama to test the waters of, being grown. I wasn't quite ready, but came back, and then I've been here ever since.
Okay. So I know that a lot of what you do now is because of Drew and is related to his story. So tell me a little bit about him.
Okay. Drew would have been 30 this October. He actually passed away in June of 2018 when he was 23. He has struggled with addiction since he was 14, a freshman in high school. Addiction is hereditary. It is generational, and his dad was an addict. So when I got married early, it was to an addict. And no matter what you do or what kind of mom you are, that can rear its head. And that's one thing I'd like to tell girls, you can fall in love with the bad boys all you want to, but there are repercussions later, no matter what you do. So
it's not always wise. I mean, just thinking about a marriage, to go into a marriage thinking you're going to change a person or fix them or anything like that. Sometimes,
or to get married before you're 35.
Well, I got married very young too, and we have made it work. And I think that there's a lot of people at that early age that go into it though thinking, he's got some flaws or she's got some flaws, but we'll fight our way through it. We'll make it work. And sometimes those are so deep that you can't overcome it even with the best intentions.
For me, I got pregnant and at an early age. And I felt like with my Southern upbringing, my grandmother was saying, you have to marry him. And that's a mistake. She even apologized to me later. We live and we learn as we go. But
a lot of that may be cultural too. I mean, if you were here in Amarillo, this is still a place where people get married earlier than maybe they might if they lived.
Grandma's from Alabama, of course, and that is definitely a Southern thing. Getting married early, having children early.
Did you see some of those addictive tendencies in Drew early, or did they not show up until he was older?
I did see them fairly early. He was my first child, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. When he was 14, he started going over to a friend's house whose dad, I did not realize, was allowing them to drink. And Drew was the life of the party. He was larger than life and funny and hilarious. And, people wanted to party with him.
There's a helplessness that a lot of parents feel in that situation.
Very helpless.
Can you talk through some of that? Because, you want to steer your kids in the right direction. You want to tell them they can or they can't do certain things. And a lot of times that's going to have the opposite effect. And so when you start to parent really hard, it's not always effective. So it's really hard to navigate.
Well, I feel like I was a pretty strict mom. Yeah, I wanted to avoid all the things that we actually crashed right head on into. By that time, I was a single mom, and it was just him and I. I had 3 boys at that time.
He was the oldest.
He was the oldest, yes. And people, when he started high school, I remember the registration, and I had a friend who was like, "You've got to get him off of that leash and give him some room to breathe." He played football. He was great at football, and he was a good kid. And I was like, well, okay. So I wasn't really ready, but I did it anyway. And that's kind of what happened. So I did hold on to him too tight, but maybe I let go too quick.
Yeah.
So it should have been more of a gradual thing.
Tell me about his addiction. What did it look like?
In the beginning, it was just drinking, and then I would find, marijuana or lying and, things like that. And then he started disappearing, which broke my heart because we were very close, and it didn't make sense to me because, he would come home all 6'4" of himself and sit in my lap, and, and there was never fighting. It just sometimes he would be gone.
Gone for like more than a day?
Yes, at first it began a night. And even after the first night, I was making up posters and posting them all over, his hangout places, and because I was just devastated. And then it would be longer and longer amounts of time. And then he got in trouble with the law, and Randall County Juvenile got involved, which is a whole other story.
Yeah.
That was very hard.
Yeah,
and I
equally
believe
hard.
that, I felt like it kind of made the problem worse. So he started getting in legal trouble for things that I did as a kid that I know a lot of kids do. But Drew just got caught at everything he did.
Okay.
And then in the end, he ended up getting sent to TYC, which really began the hard addiction. There's a lot of drugs there. And I believe that he came home in a worse way than he left.
Tell listeners what TYC is.
It is Texas Youth Center. It is basically prison for kids.
Okay.
It's a pretty rough place.
Beyond the juvenile lockup here in the county,
yes, the
right?
lockup here, the High Plains Youth Center, it's what it was called then. I'm not sure now. That's just kind of like a holding place, and they're not supposed to be there longer than 10 to 14 days. TYC is a higher level of care. It's just basically punishment for continuing to break your probation, which could look like coming home at 7:30.
Okay. Did Drew get out and come home at some point?
He did. He came home on his 18th birthday.
Okay.
And he got a job at Pantex as a contractor, and it was going really well. But the thing with Drew is he would do really well, and then he would stumble back over and over, and his heart would break, and my heart would break. And addiction is a family disease. It's not just one person who's suffering from it. So, you'd hear sirens. As a mom, you hear sirens and you just cold down your spine. It's terrifying. And especially now with the fentanyl crisis out there, fentanyl is even in marijuana. And I just talked to somebody earlier whose brother passed away from smoking a joint. And it's just a different day now than it was then. And so these kids are in danger now. And it's not even the addiction, the people who are suffering from addiction that are dying now. It's all the kids. It's any kid that's going to smoke pot at a party.
The kid who tries it once.
Yeah, that's it. If it's got fentanyl in it.
Listeners will know that we're talking about Drew in past tense. So tell us what happened.
So Drew he loved Alabama because I took him to Alabama all the time, or not all the time, but when we went, it was a huge deal. And he went and left on a bus to go to Alabama to get away from all the things here. And he was actually clean for a substantial amount of time and doing really well. He had a job making tiny houses, building tiny houses.
How old was he when he left?
He was 23. Oh, he was 22 when he left.
Okay.
He was 23 when he passed away. He did drugs and it had fentanyl in it, and he passed away. And I got the phone call. We were actually on our way to go visit him. We were in Houston at a hotel room, picking up one of our other kids from a youth camp. And so we were going to go pick him up and take him with us to Florida, and he never made it.
Do you know what he was taking?
He was taking heroin.
Okay. And then that's a phone call that I know every family dreads, every parent dreads. I know for you, it spurred you into advocacy.
Not at first.
I understand the grief process
Yes.
is a long process. A lot
is.
of people, it sends in different directions.
Yes, absolutely.
And you've, like we were discussing before we started, like you're still grieving. It's not like
Yes.
It's done. You've moved past it.
No parent can. Yeah.
Right. But it has, I guess, given you a new focus
Yes.
beyond, concerned parents. And I wanted to let you talk about that.
Okay. For a while, I just, was in a ball on the ground. And then we started driving out to Denton to the overdose rallies there that they had. August 31st every year is Overdose Awareness Day.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband and the kids and I would drive out there and do our thing. And we learned about Narcan there. And I started looking around going, why are we driving out to Denton? I mean, Denton's lovely, but why are we doing that? Why can't we do that here? And, I like I've told you, I'm just a mom. So I'm like, well, what's somebody going to do about this?
Somebody needs to fix this.
Who? And it was me. I needed to do something. So I started talking to them and building a relationship with a few of the nonprofits there. And they were saying things that are over my head and really still are, because I don't understand the business process of that a whole lot. But I did apply for my 501c3 and started going from there. I ordered my first Narcan, and actually that came in a vial, and the vial was super small. It's about half the size of your pinky. And I looked up, brought it up to the light and looked at it, and it wasn't even a third full. It was just a tiny amount of liquid. And I was just devastated that amount of liquid could have saved my child that night had somebody been prepared or been educated, any of that. And I just knew I had to do something. And then I kind of hem-hauled around after that because somebody else is going to do this, right? And I was called out to a family's house who had just lost their 17-year-old to an overdose. He had been on life support for a week. And I went out to talk to Mom after he passed, and she had other kids that are using. And I said, do you have any Narcan? And she said, what's that? And I knew then that it was going to be me.
Okay.
And so my first booth I had was at Pride, and I gave out 50 things in Narcan, and it just kind of went from there. And that's what I do now. I'm the Amarillo Narcan lady.
When was that first booth at Pride?
It was last June.
Last June. Okay. Mm-hmm. Is that when you started the 501c3?
Yeah, I'd started it before. I'd started the paperwork, and then, I had that going. I'm like, well, now what? I have to actually do something. And I was, gathering Narcan. I get my Narcan through a state-funded program in San Antonio with UT Health.
Okay.
And I just started ordering Narcan, and eventually my husband was like, you have to do something with this Narcan. And so, I don't consider myself, I don't feel like I'm a very good public speaker, but I went out there and I started talking to people because it was just that important to me to change the narrative for other families so they don't have to go through what we have in losing Drew. I've spoken at 16 school districts.
Okay.
I travel with another lady. Her name's Mia. She's a nurse, and she also gives out Narcan, and we've banded together and spoke at school districts everywhere but Amarillo. We've been to Canyon and the Outer Line, smaller areas.
How does Narcan work? How's it used?
It pulls out the dopamines out of the receptors. I'm not a very good science talker, but
again, this is not a medical podcast, but
it comes in 3 different ways. What you're going to see on the ambulances is in the vials, and what I give out are the nasal Narcan. So you're going to put it just like Flonase on one nostril, and you're going to just one shot, and then 90 seconds later. Some people will say 3 minutes. I say 90 seconds. You're going to do the second dose. You can give out Narcan. You can keep giving it if you have it up until an ambulance gets there.
Okay.
Because it is a safe drug. You can use it with babies. You can use it with animals. It is safe to use.
It's a first response, though.
Yes.
Like you find somebody who has overdosed. You believe they've overdosed.
Yes.
You call 911, and then you give them Narcan if you've got it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why everybody should have it, because it is everywhere now. My kids get irritated at me because people will be asleep in front of the grocery store. And I'm like, hello, how, and because it looks like they're sleeping a lot of the times. You have to recognize the signs of overdose. The one I give out is 4 milligrams. They do come in up to 8 milligrams. They also have a self-injector, which is kind of like an EpiPen. Those aren't as readily available. I do have some, but they work differently, but it's still the same drug.
Are people open to having that conversation with you or to accepting,
Well,
a medication that you're just wanting to give them?
I have had really mixed things. You get so many people that are like, we don't need that, or I don't do that. Well, the thing is, you can't Narcan yourself. I don't do that either, but I could have saved my son that night had I
Right.
been there and had Narcan on hand. It's really dangerous to say that it's not going to happen in your house with your family, not my child, because you could be wrong, and not expect it.
Well, to me, it's a lot like, the conversations about safe sex. If you say, oh, I don't need to give my kids condoms
Absolutely.
because they're not going to do that.
They would never.
Yes. And that's why we have a lot of teen pregnancies, or we have a lot of people getting married and having kids too early because they're not prepared for something that inevitably happens in enough percentage of the population.
On the other hand, I have had great response too. I've had people just so excited. I've had people friend me on Facebook and want to know more. I have no shame pickup spots.
Okay.
And those businesses I've had a few that were like, I don't know, but then, they do when they look into it.
So these are places that keep a stock.
They do. At first I wanted to do vending machines. I wanted to go big like Austin, and I've just heard they have some all over Oklahoma. So I looked at vending machines, and they're really expensive. And besides the Narcan, we're funding everything ourselves, just my family. We're a one-income homeschool family, so can't afford the great big vending machines. And then I looked at some kind of podunk vending machines, and I'm going to have one. So I started contacting businesses and was like, would you be willing to have the Narcan out where someone can pick them up? And most of them have been like, yeah, And so my only thing is they have to have them out where people can just get them, because my thing is shame. I don't want people to have to battle with the shame. So these places have them out where you can just pick them up and take them with you. No questions asked. You don't have to say anything. You just pick it up and go.
What are those locations in Amarillo?
Those are West Texas RX, and they actually hosted our overdose awareness rally last year. 806 Coffee Shop, Blackline Culture Tattoo Shop, Space Out Smoke Shop, Obsidian Crystal Shop, South Lawn Laundromat, Mr. Puff Smoke Shop, Shark Beach Burgers, which have really good burgers, and Vape World in Borger, Pampa, and Perryton. And I have people contacting me all the time that are wanting to do that. So I'm actually looking for some in Southwest Amarillo and on the north side. So those are not areas that are covered right now, but
and you're trying to set it up in a way that they don't have to go interact with somebody.
Right. No,
it's just a place, and it's clear that you can just grab it and go.
Yes. Everybody needs Narcan on hand, even if you don't use drugs.
This is one thing I've noticed. I'm thinking of the last time I was in New York City and I was riding the subway, and there were posters about Narcan, advertisements about it. And so I've noticed it as I've seen it in different places, but you don't see the same thing here. Because culturally, maybe we feel like it's an admission of drug use or an openness to something that is kind of taboo.
If we say it, it'll come true.
Exactly.
Kind of thing, yes.
There's a discomfort maybe that we have with it.
Well, I am the only one doing it, Mia and I, right now. And the thing is, I want to do that. So when I have the funds available, I will be able to do that. And you will see those posters. I want to get my car wrapped. I'm going everywhere all the time. I want to be loud about it. And eventually I'd like to get a grant of some sort and be able to do that. So I think it just has to do with who's going to do it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And those places, they have people to do it. So I don't think it's necessarily just the area or culturally. It's just we need to get it done.
Somebody needs to start that conversation.
Yes.
And that's what you're doing.
Yes. Oh, I've talked about grants before, and you really have to do smaller grants. So it's just in getting it done, and it will get done.
Okay. Do you have plans beyond that? As your organization builds awareness, as you start to grow, do you see it becoming something more than you're just the Narcan lady? You're handing out boxes to people?
I don't know that I really want it to be more than what it is. I am going to start a community group for parents of loss, possibly extending out to just loved ones in general of loss of overdose. But beyond that, I really don't want it to grow. my community is enough. I want to serve Drew's community. Although he died in Alabama, this was his community. He grew up here, and these are the people I want to serve.
Are
On a
you
small level.
right? But that's sometimes
I want to keep it personal.
Yeah, and that's sometimes where the most effective change comes
I
from.
feel like it is.
Are you surprised? I mean, obviously, nobody plans for their child to die of a drug overdose, and so I want to give it that context. But are you surprised that you've ended up in a position where you are moving this direction? You are advocating for something that's very personal to you. You're stepping out from, like you said, you're a mom at home. This is something that's not always comfortable, to take a leadership role, to start a nonprofit, to get out in front of people.
When Drew first passed away of an overdose, it's the first, and people immediately, when your child passes away, they want to know how it happened. People are very nosy, and that's fine. I understand that to a degree. You also have to have a bit of class, but people do ask. And I told myself that very first time, look them in the eye and tell them it was a drug overdose. And it's so important to me to start that conversation and for people to know. And with me being loud about it, and I grieve out loud, I talk about this kind of stuff out loud, and I feel like other people, it allows them to be able to talk out loud. I had a mom tell me, my son's been dead 2 years and nobody knows how he died. I mean, I was humiliated. No, your son is important and he lived, and let's talk about him. That's really important to me.
Is there anything about Amarillo that, based on your experience, that is different from other places in terms of the drug culture, the danger of it, the availability of it, or are we just like every other place?
You're going to hear people on Facebook all the time saying, oh, Amarillo is so awful and the drugs are so awful here. It's awful everywhere.
Okay.
It's bad everywhere.
I mean, he got his bad drugs in Alabama.
Right, exactly. So it's everywhere. It is. You're not going to go anywhere and not see that.
Tell me about the community response here. Being someone who's gone through the grief process, someone who's out in the community now advocating for something. What has it taught you about Amarillo people?
I think they're great. I mean, it's been, like I said, half and half, but the community has really embraced this.
Do you see that we are maybe changing a little bit or growing out of that very protective, we're not going to talk about hard things. We're not going to admit that our kids might have a problem or that they might have access to that. Is that changing at all?
I don't know that is yet. I just had somebody make a comment the other day. It was on Facebook. I need to stay off Facebook. They were saying that drug addicts are like roaches and churches keep feeding them, and that God doesn't love drug addicts, things like that. You still have people like that. And no matter what you do or what you say, those kind of people are not going to change their mind. My husband keeps telling me to quit talking to them. It's kind of a losing battle. So I just keep going and doing what I do and hope that Drew's story touches one life.
Okay.
One. I've actually gotten feedback that specifically six people from the Narcan I've given out have been saved. That keeps me going.
Wow, yeah. Whether
or not you have these folks on Facebook saying those things or not. I'm like, can this be real? Did that really happen? Yes, this happened. This happened because I'm doing this. And even though I'm overwhelmed often, keep going, keep doing it. That doesn't matter. You just have to keep walking and doing the best you can do.
I want to close just by asking you something that I think is, as a parent myself, that I like to hear, and I think my listeners will like to hear. And that's for you to talk a little bit about your kids in terms of nature versus nurture. That's always a conversation. How much of who they are and who they become is on you as a parent, because that's super stressful. I know. And how much is built into them. And I know that you look at Drew and you look at his struggles and you see that there's addictive genetics maybe in there. Yeah. It's hard for sometimes parents feel responsible for kids who fall into something bad, who go through a tragedy. I know you've got, like Drew's not your only child. I
Right.
wanted to let you talk just a little bit about your family and about how you think about parenting, having gone through what you've gone through.
I still love being a mama. I've been a mom for 30 years and I kept doing it. So, must love it. But, Elijah is 27 and he's awesome. And then, I have one that's almost 21, Creed, and he is a Marine at Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
And, we're super proud of him. And one thing I always say is that people are often praising me. Oh, you raised a Marine. Good job, Mom. Good job. And I always look them in the eye and say, I also raised a kid who struggles with addiction and raised a kid who overdosed on drugs. So I believe that is an important message for people that addiction is a family disease. It's hereditary, and sometimes it just happens. There's nothing you can do to stop it. I also have an 11-year-old girl. She's the only girl, bless her little heart, and a 9-year-old boy.
Okay. So like you said,
They're
you've
spaced out,
continued
yes.
to be a mom.
I have, and I homeschool. I love it.
When you tell them about your Marine and your son who died of a drug overdose, is that a conversation that still makes people uncomfortable? Like your forthrightness, your authenticity in talking about it.
Usually they're like, oh, okay, I don't know what to say to that. But I just, it's very important to look people in the eye and just tell them.
I feel like if we had more hard conversations like that, just the awareness would allow us to change a little bit, to not bury our heads in the sand about potential problems.
We have to humanize addiction. It's everybody out there who is addicted was a child once. They have mom, they have a family who loves them. So, there's a song out there called I Wish I Would Have Known You When You Were an Innocent Child. And pretty good song. Says a lot.
This week's episode is supported by Brick and Elm Magazine's Ice Cream Fundraiser at 6 p.m. on August 6th at Sam Houston Park. And you're invited to come to it. I'm going to be there, of course. This event is a collaboration with Amarillo Parks and Recreation and their weekly Starlight Theater concert series. Our latest Brick and Elm Magazine cover story is about frozen treats in Amarillo. So we decided to bring several of those restaurants we highlighted, ice cream vendors, paleta bars, etc., to bring their treats to the concert so you can try their products. The concert itself is free. Starlight Theater is always free. But we're going to be selling $10 punch cards to raise money for the 100 Club of the Texas Panhandle. And these punch cards will give you access to ice cream, frozen treats, all kinds of stuff from Blue Sky, Cream Over Waffles, El Tropico, Purple Flamingo Pops, and Toho's Ice Cream Shop, and the Paleta Bar. So come to the event, check out Brick and Elm's social media posts for details. I hope you'll join us Tuesday, August 6th for the final Starlight Theater of the season, a concert featuring insufficient funds and frozen treats from local vendors. Okay, I'm back with Angie Duncan, Amarillo's Narcan lady. Angie, this is the part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum and Canyon. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its collection includes the Burnett No. 2 wellhead, which was used for the very first successful oil well in the Texas Panhandle, which was located on property belonging to the 4 Sixes Ranch in Carson County. You can see that at the museum and learn more at panhandleplains.org. Okay, first question I've been asking guests is, when you think of Amarillo 10 years from now, what do you hope for?
Of course, I want Narcan in every house.
Okay.
Also,
that's a serious goal for you.
That's a serious goal. Also would like to see more open-minded leadership with a heart towards our unhoused community and other marginalized communities.
There has been some encouraging movement in that direction. I feel like the Transformation Park project has the potential to be something that's good. We're still kind of waiting for it because it's still in process. There's a lot of different players involved. So it's a complicated project.
I can't wait.
I feel like it feels hopeful to me.
Yeah.
Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
Unpopular opinion, land development. I love land. Every time I turn around, they're building something else.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm probably shooting myself in the foot because, I also want other things that belong to bigger cities.
Yeah. The places for people to live allows people to come here.
Yes, I know. I love the earth.
Well, that is one thing. Amarillo has the potential to really sprawl because we have so much land
Yeah.
outside the city limits. And that might keep us from building up, like more apartments, more multi-use kinds of facilities downtown, all that sort of stuff. So what does this area not have enough of?
Trees and rain.
Yeah.
I'm from Alabama. I need those trees and rain. And whatever it is that keeps us from having a Trader Joe's.
Okay.
We need more of that because I've been requesting a Trader Joe's every 2 months or so on their website. So we need more of whatever they need for us to have.
I don't think anybody will disagree about that. What's your favorite street in Amarillo?
Definitely Julian Boulevard.
Okay.
So that's in my neighborhood, and I've always loved it. And then when we got a house right by there, I just loved it. And the history behind it, it was the first airport in Amarillo. And I always take that way, and when I don't have to, it looks a lot like Alabama in that area.
Okay.
That and the Wolfland neighborhood, of course, but
big,
it's the trees for
mature
me.
trees.
My kids make fun of me because I literally hug trees. So,
what's your favorite local restaurant or food truck?
Punjabi Affair,
okay,
for sure. They're so kind. Well, the food's awesome, and they're just so kind and mindful about food allergies. Mm-hmm. So if you tell them what's your food allergy, they'll go out of their way. My food truck is that weird place.
Okay,
I love them.
Yeah, a really solid vegan or vegetarian menu.
It is. I like them a lot.
All right.
And they just offered to be a Narcan pickup spot
Did they?
today.
Okay.
Haven't talked to them about it yet.
Cool. Well, that may be something we can add to the list.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
What's the most underrated aspect of living in Amarillo?
I have two. One is that you can get from point A to point B in 15 minutes. Even though it's kind of got a bigger town feel, you can get anywhere. Mm-hmm. And like my sister lives in Colorado Springs. I was just in Birmingham, went back home, and it takes 20 minutes to go 3 miles, literally. So, and the other is our homeschool resources here. We have a great homeschool community.
Okay.
Whether you're looking for religious or non-religious, or if you want to do all the way hardcore college prep homeschool to unschooling, we have something for you in this town. And it's so great to have that.
There's a lot of independent thinkers in Amarillo, and I feel like that vibrant homeschool community on all sides, like religious or non-religious, whatever,
they're all great.
Reflects that.
Yeah, there's a lot of options.
Okay, other than your own, what's your favorite local nonprofit?
It's called Broken Vessels. It is a parents-only grief group. I started going to it a little bit after Drew passed away, and Christy and Greg Tucker started it after they lost their daughter, Sarah. And it's just parents. There's no agenda. We become family, and it's so good to have. I think the most important thing after you lose a child to start even processing to try to heal is having somebody reach out to you.
Okay.
And somebody that knows what you're going through, because you all of a sudden feel very lonely, and it's just a hard place to be. It's like the whole world, even the lighting looks different. The sun's color is different. But at Broken Vessels, there's somebody that will reach out to you and just bring you in like family. And it's just an awesome, awesome organization.
Okay. When was the last time you visited the Big Texan?
I actually know this. Mother's Day in 2019.
Okay.
So they used to have a breakfast buffet on Mother's Day. I'm not sure if it was always, but we always went on Mother's Day because my mother really loved it.
Okay. Was it a pretty good
It was
buffet?
good. I mean, I have a terrible memory. I'm pretty sure it was like breakfast burritos, but
Right. I'm trying to imagine like steaks or...
No, it was like breakfast burritos and eggs and sausage and fruit. Everybody loved it.
Okay.
So yeah, but it's been a while.
5 years ago, and you can tell me the exact date. That's pretty good.
And I can tell you what the food is because I'm fluffy and like the food.
Okay. Well, that concludes the 8 straight questions. I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you would like listeners to know about or to experience?
I want you to know about Code Blue.
Okay.
And what an amazing program it is. It's a program of Amarillo Housing First, and they open when the weather gets to be a certain degree, and they're the only low barrier shelter in town. Sometimes people can't or won't go to other shelters, and they will pick you up. Mm-hmm. They allow pets, and they feed you. And it's pretty amazing. Low barrier is not having an ID or not having to do a background check, or even intoxicated people can come in, which I love that because everybody deserves to be warm. Every human deserves food. So that's a big deal. And they, they're not government funded. They're doing their own thing, and they're just pretty amazing.
Okay. That's a great endorsement, Angie Duncan. I appreciate it. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
And that concludes the episode. I want to say thanks to Angie for the interview. You can learn more about her work on Facebook, where you can search for Amarillo Narcan Lady or Texas Panhandle Overdose Awareness. You'll find her. Thanks also to Lazy Boy and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting this podcast. And as always, to Angelina Marie for editing the show. Thank you for listening. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because of listeners like you and the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/Hey Amarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Patrick Burns, Josh Wood, Jason Burr, Wes Reeves, Corey Burns, Katie Linger, Barbara and Jim Witten, and Cindy Graham. This has been episode 363. My name is Jason Boyette, and I'll see you next week.